The academy was not just a school, it was a monument to the unity of countless worlds, carved from silver stone and crystal towers that reached into the endless sky. It stood as proof that different races could learn together, compete together, and rise together. Yet within those shining halls, where students with claws and scales and wings filled the air with noise, there was always a whisper that humans were fragile. The human boy walked through those corridors each day with steady steps, his uniform plain, his face unreadable. He passed beneath banners of alien empires and beside classmates with armored hides and glowing eyes, yet every glance that touched him carried the same message. He was weaker than them. He was a guest in a world that did not believe he belonged. He sat in classes where others showed their gifts, wings that carried them into the air, gills that allowed them to breathe beneath the water's skin, that resisted blades and fire and light that could scorch stone. Yet when it came to him there was nothing to display. His skin bruised easily, his bones broke quickly, his strength seemed ordinary compared to the marvels around him. The teachers did not say it, but their silence was clear. They thought he was fragile. The other students did not hide it. They mocked him in the halls with laughter sharp as knives. They said humans were creatures of chance, clinging to survival on a small world. They said humans had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no fire and no lightning, only soft skin and easily broken flesh. But the boy never raised his voice against them. He did not fight their words. He carried their laughter on his shoulders like a cloak. He listened, and he watched, his eyes always calm like the surface of still water. His silence was not weakness, though none could see it. It was patience. In the training fields where alien youths unleashed fire and venom, and sound that shattered walls, the human moved quietly. He trained with weights that others ignored. He studied tactics with focus that never broke. He measured every breath, every step, every strike, as though he understood something others did not. When he fell, he rose without complaint. When he failed, he returned the next day without hesitation. Some called him foolish, others pitied him. They believed his silence was surrender. But the boy was not broken. He had heard the whispers all his life that humans were fragile, that humans were prey, yet deep inside him burned a quiet truth, a truth he never spoke because no one would believe it, a truth that he knew would one day speak for itself. Academy towered above him, filled with voices that doubted him, yet he walked its halls with the same steady rhythm each day, his eyes forward, his hands steady, his silence unbroken. No one understood why, no one could see the strengths that waited beneath the quiet mask he wore. They saw only fragility, but he knew the day would come when they would see something else entirely. The students of the academy carried their pride like banners. Each step they took was meant to show their heritage, their power, their bloodlines that stretched back to warriors who conquered worlds or rulers who commanded fleets. And among them walked the human boy, a figure who did not belong to their stories or their songs. When the classes ended and the students gathered in the halls, voices rose in sharp laughter like knives cutting through silence, and the human was always their target. They pointed at his hands, which bore no claws. They touched his arms, which bore no scales. They marveled at his skin, which bruised with the lightest blow, and they asked how such a creature could be expected to survive in a galaxy where death lurked behind every shadow. They said his bones would shatter if he fell. They said his lungs would collapse in thinner air. They said his heart was slow and weak. They said his mind could never grasp the depth of alien knowledge, and each word struck like stone against flesh. But the boy never replied. He did not show anger. He did not strike back. He did not even frown. His silence became his shield, and his calm became the one thing they could not break. The teachers watched in silence, some with pity, and some with contempt, for they, too, had been raised on the belief that humans were lesser creatures, too fragile to stand beside the mighty races of the stars. They allowed the ridicule to continue, because they believed it was simply the truth of things, and that the boy would eventually vanish from the academy, like a weak branch broken by the wind. But the boy remained. He walked into the same classrooms and took the same seats. He listened with the same quiet attention. He answered when asked and never faltered, even as the mockery grew sharper, even as the taunts grew louder. They called him prey. They called him shadow. They called him the mistake of the academy. Yet still he returned every day. What none of them saw was the spark hidden beneath his calm eyes. When he heard their words, he stored them within himself, not as wounds but as fuel. And when he trained, he remembered them. When he studied, he remembered them. When he walked the halls in silence, he remembered every laugh and every doubt, and carried it not as a weight but as a fire that burned unseen. The alien students thought themselves invincible. They flexed their claws and spread their wings. They boasted of their venom and their fire, but they had never been tested by true struggle. They had never lived with the certainty of weakness that the boy carried every day. And so while they mocked him, they did not see the truth. They did not understand that the strength of humanity was not in armor or fire, but in something deeper. And so the boy walked on beneath the weight of their words, as calm as ever, carrying within him the fire of every insult, waiting for the day when silence would no longer be needed. The human boy was different, not in the ways his classmates mocked him, but in the ways no one noticed when the others argued or shouted. He remained silent when they struck each other to prove strength. He did not join when they boasted of victories. In training, he listened without envy. He walked the halls with a quiet step that unsettled those who paid attention, for there was something in his calm that did not match the weakness they believed. During combat lessons, the instructors encouraged. Displays of power, claws tore against steel, and flames lit the air. Students screamed with laughter and rage, but the boy moved differently. He studied the field as if every detail mattered, the placement of feet, the timing of strikes, the angle of a glance. He fought without flourish, his motions simple and efficient, and though he lost often, he never showed shame, and though he fell often, he always rose with steady eyes. At night, while the others slept in their dorms, surrounded by comfort, the boy was awake, his hands wrapped in bandages, his body aching from training alone. He ran the corridors, he lifted weights, he memorized texts. While the academy was silent and dark, he built himself piece by piece, not through sudden bursts of brilliance, but through relentless persistence. Some of the students began to notice, though they never said it aloud. They saw how his bruises faded and returned again and again. They saw how his breath never wavered even after long drills. They saw how he endured pain that would have sent them into despair, yet they still told themselves he was fragile, because to admit otherwise was to question everything they had been taught. The boy himself never revealed what lay within him. He carried his silence like armor. He heard the laughter, but he also heard the fear beneath it, the way their voices sometimes shook, the way their eyes sometimes lingered too long. He knew that what unsettled them was not his weakness, but the possibility that they were wrong. About Jim in the library, he read of creatures from across the stars, beasts that had hunted empires and broken armies, and his eyes always returned to one name, the predator that no student dared to speak aloud, the monster that roamed the wilds beyond the academy, the living shadow that had claimed the lives of countless soldiers and explorers. His gaze lingered on its description, on its strength and terror, and a strange calm settled over him, as though he were preparing for something inevitable. Days passed, and his silence only deepened. The mockery grew, but he did not flinch, he did not answer, he did not fight back, and this quiet began to spread like an unseen storm. Some students laughed harder to push away their unease, others began to avoid his gaze, and still others watched him in secret, wondering what he carried within him that allowed him to remain unshaken. And through it all, the boy kept walking with steady steps, as if waiting for the day when the truth he carried would step into the light and silence all voices without a single word. Far beyond the shining towers of the academy lay lands no student dared to wander, forests where shadows moved without sound, valleys where bones of ancient creatures lay scattered, and mountains that echoed with roars that silenced even the boldest. Warriors in those lands lived, the predator, the beast that every race feared, the nightmare whispered in stories to frighten children and soldiers alike. The predator was not merely an animal, it was a force of nature, its body forged by evolution for the single purpose of domination, its claws curved like blades, able to carve through stone, its teeth sharp as obsidian, designed to pierce armor, its muscles rippled beneath thick hide, darker than midnight, eyes burned with eerie light like coals from a dying fire. Always watching, always waiting, it moved with silence that defied its size, and when it struck, it was as though death itself had descended from the shadows. Armies had tried to hunt it, legends told of warriors armed with weapons that could melt steel, yet none returned. Patrols vanished in silence, their signals cut off mid-scream, villages abandoned when the predator came near, and even fleets circling above were said to be powerless, for no one could predict where it would strike next. Its hunger was endless, its cunning terrifying. It was not a mindless monster, but something more deliberate, something that tested its prey and learned their weaknesses. Among the academy students, the predator was spoken of in hushed voices, a creature of myth as much as flesh. It was a reminder of what fragility truly meant. It was proof that no matter how strong they believed themselves to be, there existed something greater, something that could reduce their power to nothing in the blink of an eye, for even the strongest among them would never dare to face it. The Human boy read about this beast in old records. Late at night the pages filled with accounts of loss and fear, drawings of its monstrous form, etched with trembling hands. But where others saw only terror, he saw possibility. He studied the way it moved, the way it hunted, the patterns in its strikes. He memorized every word, every fragment of detail, and his eyes never left the page until the images of the predator became part of his thoughts. To the aliens, the predator was proof that humans could never survive. If one appeared on their world, humans would be the first to fall, they said. Yet the boy kept reading, and with every passage his silence grew heavier. Not with fear but with certainty. He knew what he must do, he knew where he must go, and though no one suspected his plan, he carried it within himself, like a secret fire, waiting for the right moment. The predator remained in the wilds, feared by all, unseen but always present, a living shadow over the academy, and though no one could imagine it ever being tamed or touched or carried, the boy began to wonder if perhaps the truth about humans was not fragility, but something else entirely, something that no one yet understood. The predator was not a rumor to those who lived near its hunting grounds. It was a certainty, a shadow that lingered at the edge of every night, a sound carried by the wind that froze even the bravest hearts. Soldiers had been sent again and again to contain it, squads equipped with weapons forged from the strongest alloys, armor layered with energy fields and tracking devices, tuned to sense even the faintest movement. Yet each mission ended the same way: silence, first on the radios, then silence on the battlefield, and finally silence in the reports, for no one returned. Its speed was unnatural for its size. Its claws slashed faster than a blade. Its leaps carried it across valleys in a single bound. Its roar shattered stone and left machines stuttering. Its body absorbed wounds that would have killed other beasts, and within moments it rose again, relentless hunger burning in its eyes. Entire platoons had been swallowed by the darkness around it, and not a single trace remained except torn ground and shattered weapons left behind like offerings to the void. In the academy halls, the students spoke of it with a mixture of awe and terror, their words carrying the weight of stories passed down for generations. Some claimed the predator was not born of nature, but of something greater, an experiment gone wrong, or a weapon left behind from a forgotten war. Others whispered that it was eternal, that it could never truly die, that it was the embodiment of survival itself, the final test for any who believed themselves mighty. And yet even with this fearsome, students found pride in mocking the human boy. They told him that if the predator ever walked into the academy halls, his kind would be the first devoured. They said that a human would not last a single breath before those claws sliced through fragile flesh. They laughed as they described it, and for a moment, even they shivered at their own words. But the boy did not flinch. He listened with the same still eyes, and when he turned away his expression did not change. His silence unsettled them, because deep down they wondered if he was not afraid, if perhaps he knew something they did not. Their laughter grew louder to cover the unease, but the fire within him only grew brighter. The predator remained untouchable in the wilds, a nightmare given form. Armies failed, fleets avoided its territory, and entire civilizations shifted their borders to keep distance. Yet the boy kept reading about it, late at night studying every account, every report, every whisper. He pieced together a picture of its habits, where it hunted, how it moved, what it chose as prey, and in his silence he began to form a plan that no one would dare imagine. For while others saw the predator as death unending, the boy saw it as the measure of truth, the scale against which all strength could be weighed. And he believed that if humans were truly fragile, then they would break before it, but if they were something else, then perhaps only he could show the galaxy what that something truly was. The human boy was gone. One morning his bunk neatly made, his books stacked in order, his uniform folded with precision, as though he had simply stepped out for a walk. Yet the hours stretched into days, and no one saw him return. Whispers spread quickly through the academy, filling every corridor with speculation. Some said he had finally broken under the weight of endless mockery. Others claimed he had begged for transfer to a safer place, back among his own kind. Still others believed he had fled into the shadows, ashamed of his weakness. Instructors pretended not to notice his absence, yet their eyes betrayed unease, for every student was accounted for except the human, and though they would not admit it, even they felt a sliver of guilt at the silence they had allowed when others mocked him. Now that silence had become a void that swallowed answers. The alien students were divided. Some laughed loudly, claiming their words had proven true, and the fragile boy had simply vanished like a leaf carried by wind. Others felt a strange hollowness that unsettled them. They remembered the steady eyes that had never wavered, the silence that had never cracked, and they wondered if perhaps he had left for a reason they could not understand. Rumors twisted into wilder shapes. One claimed he had gone into the city to hide, another that he had been taken by officials, embarrassed by his weakness and wanting to protect the reputation of humans. Another whispered that he had been seen walking toward the wilderness beyond the walls, where even soldiers dared not tread, the wilderness where the predator ruled. The mention of the predator silenced even the boldest voices, for none could imagine such a thing. The very idea that a human would walk into the lands of that nightmare was absurd. No one believed he could last a single step, yet the rumor persisted, spreading from dormitory to cafeteria to training field, like smoke through the air, and though they tried to laugh it off, their laughter trembled. Days turned into weeks, and still no sign of him. The instructors finally declared that the boy had abandoned his studies and struck his name from the records. The academy moved on, as though he had never existed, but the truth was, he lingered. In every thought, for his absence was a mystery none could solve. Some students felt relief, thinking they would no longer be reminded of weakness. Others felt disappointment. A strange and quiet disappointment that left them restless at night, and a few felt something stronger, a faint fear that perhaps he had not fled at all, but had chosen his path deliberately, a fear that his silence had not been surrendered, but preparation. No one could prove it, yet whispers clung to the academy like shadows, that the human boy had not vanished in defeat, but had stepped into the wilderness where the predator reigned, as if seeking an answer. Only he was willing to face an answer that would either break him or make him something none could deny. The academy morning began like any other. The students filled the halls with chatter, their voices sharp and proud as they compared test scores and retold training matches. The air shimmered with the scent of ozone from the practice chambers, and the ground trembled with the weight of alien steps. When the classroom doors slid open, no one expected anything unusual, for the human boy had been gone for many weeks, his name already fading from their lists, his presence erased as though he had never walked among them. But then silence fell. It swept through the room like a wave. One by one, the voices broke off until only the hum of the lights remained. The doorway framed a figure. They all recognized the human boy, his uniform still neat, his steps as calm as ever, his eyes steady, without a trace of fear or exhaustion. He had returned, yet it was not his return alone that froze every heart. It was what he carried with him across his shoulders hung the predator, the beast of legends, its monstrous body slumped in unnatural stillness, its claws dull against the floor, its head bowed as though defeated. The students stared, unable to breathe, their minds refusing to accept what they saw for the creature they had feared their entire lives. The terror spoken of in whispers and warnings now rested like a cloak on the shoulders of the one they had called fragile. Some stumbled back, their chairs crashing to the ground. Others pressed against the walls, trembling as their eyes darted between the boy and the beast. A few covered their mouths to stifle cries of disbelief, and still others leaned forward, caught between terror and awe, unable to look away, their hearts pounding in their chests. The predator twitched once, its massive muscles flexing as if to remind them of its power, yet it did not strike, it did not roar, it did not leap. It remained subdued, carried as if it had chosen to bend before the human, who bore no claws, no armor, no flames, only skin and bone and steady silence. The instructor froze mid-sentence, his jaw tight, his eyes wide, his authority shattered in an instant. For nothing in his years of training had prepared him for this sight. He had taught that humans were weak, that they were prey, and now one stood before him carrying the very nightmare that had devoured armies. The boy did not speak, he did not need to. His calm steps echoed louder than any words. He walked to his seat, and the predator followed obediently, like a shadow lingering at his side as though bound by unseen chains. He lowered himself into his chair, his expression unchanged, as if he had simply walked in with a book rather than the most feared creature in the galaxy. The silence stretched heavy, thick, unbroken. No one dared move, no one dared breathe, and in that moment the truth of fragility shattered forever. For what they saw before them was not weakness, it was something beyond strength. It was mystery, it was defiance, it was legend born before their eyes. The classroom remained frozen, as though time itself had stopped. The human boy sat in silence while the predator crouched beside him, its monstrous frame barely fitting within the room, its glowing eyes scanning the rows of students who stared back in disbelief. Every breath felt heavy in the air, as if the walls themselves held their voices captive. No one dared to speak, no one dared to move, for fear that the creature might rise and tear them apart. The alien students who had once laughed the loudest were the first to shrink into their seats, their scales and horns and wings trembling as they tried to hide behind the safety of desks. They remembered every word they had thrown at the boy, every insult, every claim that his kind were fragile, and now those words echoed back at them like ghosts tearing through their pride. Others leaned forward, unable to resist the gravity of the moment, their eyes wide with awe, not fear, for in their hearts a different spark had been lit. They saw the predator not as a monster but as proof that the human was something else entirely, something greater than they had ever imagined, and though they did not yet understand it, they felt respect stir where mockery had once lived. The instructor struggled to regain composure, his voice cracking as he demanded the human explain himself, but the boy did not answer. He simply rested his hands on the desk, calm, steady, unshaken. His silence spoke louder than any explanation, for how could words ever capture what had been done? The predator shifted with a low growl, its breath thick with heat, its claws scraping the floor, and every student flinched, as though death itself had brushed against them. Yet the beast did not strike. It turned its head toward the human as if awaiting a signal, its glowing eyes softened into obedience, and in that gesture, the walls of certainty cracked beyond repair. Whispers began to rise, first timid, then louder, spreading like wildfire through the academy. By the end of the hour, the story had already escaped the classroom, racing across halls and dormitories. The human boy had returned. The human boy had carried the predator. The human boy had done what no army, no fleet, no warrior had ever achieved, and every ear strained to hear Marin. The cafeteria voices argued. Some still claimed it was a trick, that the predator must have been drugged or broken before he touched it. Others whispered of darker possibilities, that the human had struck a pact with forces unknown. Yet beneath the doubts there was fear, and beneath the fear there was wonder, because even if it was trickery, the image of the boy walking calmly, with the predator at his side, would not leave their minds. The boy himself did not seek to explain. He walked from room to room with the same steady steps, his silent shadow following him, like proof of every word unspoken. Wherever he passed, students parted in silence, not out of mockery but out of something far heavier. They had thought humans fragile, but now they could not think of them at all without remembering the boy who carried the beast that hunted them. Word of the event spread beyond the academy, faster than light itself, carried on trembling voices and hurried transmissions. Entire fleets heard the whispers, entire councils sat in silence as reports reached their chambers. The humans were not fragile. The humans were not prey, for one of them had walked into a classroom carrying the predator, the nightmare that had hunted worlds. The beast no army could tame, and he had carried it as though it were nothing more than a companion. The academy became the center of the galaxy, every corridor filled with messengers, every instructor questioned, every student retelling the moment again and again, and though each account shifted in detail, they all ended the same way. The boy returned, and the predator bowed to him. The truth stood unshaken like a mountain before a stone. The alien races who had laughed at humans felt a strange unease, for if one human could do this, what might their kind achieve? In time, they replayed every moment they had dismissed, the fragile bones, the soft skin, the lack of claws and fire and venom, and they realized perhaps weakness had been an illusion, perhaps fragility was a mask for something deeper, something that could not be measured by scales or horns or Students who had mocked him the most now avoided his gaze, unable to face the steady calm in his eyes. Their pride lay shattered. Their words dissolved like mist, and some among them felt shame pressing heavy upon their shoulders, for they remembered how he had endured every insult without reply, as though he had been waiting for this day. Others, however, could not help but admire him, their hearts filled with a new fire. They spoke of him as an equal, as a warrior, as something beyond any category. They had known. They watched his steps, not with ridicule but with reverence, for they knew now they had seen history unfold within their very walls. The predator remained at his side, silent and obedient, as though it had chosen him, as though it had recognized in him the one truth no one else could see. The boy did not command it with chains or force. He needed no weapon, no threat. The bond was deeper, unspoken, and absolute, and this unsettled even the greatest minds of the galaxy. For if the most feared beast could kneel before a human, then perhaps the galaxy itself would one day do the same. The instructors wrote reports that would be studied for centuries, their words careful, their tone reverent, yet beneath the ink and data, they too felt fear and awe, for their teachings had been overturned in a single moment. Every lesson about fragility, every assumption about weakness, dissolved like sand under water. The boy never raised his voice, he never declared victory, he never demanded recognition. He continued to sit in his classes, to study his lessons, to walk the halls with steady silence, but everywhere he went, the weight of his presence grew heavier and heavier until it became legend, the story of the human who carried the predator and changed the way the galaxy saw his kind forever.